serious, teachers of Reddit. Do students actually offer sex in exchange for good grades? What are your stories? NSFW? While I was a TA in grad school, this one really hot undergrad girl propositioned my advisor for a passing grade. She did it again a week later. Obviously he refused both times. The second time he kind of told her off too. Another week goes by. Her father calls him up, obliquely offering a bribe to improve her grade. He refuses. A week later, the parents called the dean, accusing my advisor of unfairly grading her, treating her badly, etc. etc. Luckily my advisor had kept everyone apprised of the situation the whole time, so the dean backed him, and the girl failed the class. Back when MySpace was still a thing, I was a grad student TAing an undergrad astronomy class. I would occasionally get friend requests from students and tentatively add them, since a fair number of them seemed to feel a lot more comfortable asking for help on homework over MySpace messages than through the formal school email. Fast forward to halfway through the semester, the class hottie sends me a friend request, literally the most attractive person in a class of 100. She messaged me saying that she was having trouble with the observation project and asked to meet me out at the observatory at night so I can point out the stars to her. Being a bit wary, I told her to just stop by during normal observatory hours when I would be working, and there'd be plenty of other students there too. She eventually came out, but only at the very end of observatory hours when almost everyone had left. I start getting a bit nervous, but try to focus on the observation project. To be honest, though, I could never quite figure out what her trouble actually was with the project. She seemed to grasp all the concepts just fine. The messages continue coming, getting a bit more personal each time. As the semester is drawing to a close, she asks if she can take me out to coffee. I go into full freak out mode, as I've heard all the stories about professors getting cornered to improve grades, and the backlash that can occur. I write her back, making it very clear that, so long as I'm her TA, I'm just her TA. Thing is, something didn't add up here. She had the third highest grade in class, easily an A, if not A+, so why would she need the extra help? It turns out she really just wanted to date me and was actually studying extra hard to get good grades in that class to impress me. The trouble she was having with the observation project was a convenient ruse to try to see me alone. We started dating soon after the semester ended, and we are getting married next week. I have rarely been hit on by students and never been offered sex for grades, except maybe once when a student said she'd do anything for a better grade. But she really just meant extra homework or retaking an exam. A wealthy parent offered me a thinly veiled bribe once. The athletic department sent someone over to talk to me once because I wouldn't do special favors for athletes. TLDR, still waiting to hear the porn soundtrack. When I was teaching high school, I taught across the hall from a keyboarding teacher whose husband was a middle school history teacher. They were both in their early 50s at the time, and she was a few years older. She was also quite attractive at that time, so I imagine she was very beautiful in her younger days. Back when her husband was a senior in high school, she was hired fresh out of college as a typing teacher. He said so many guys took typing his senior year because of the hot young teacher. They both married other people back then, but got divorced and married each other in their 30s. But whenever a new scandal hit the news about a teacher banging a student, he'd chime in, "I banged my high school typing teacher," to which he'd promptly be punched by his wife. I had a case where one of my student's older sisters came on to me very strongly, and we did end up dating. It wasn't anything serious or exclusive, and I had a feeling it was just for the novelty of sleeping with her brother's teacher. She was wild, that's for sure. Too wild for me, but she would spend time telling me about her brother and asking for advice on what to do with him. As an educator in the school system, I'm speaking from experience when I say that even suspicion will ruin your career faster than anything else. While I have never been propositioned by anyone, I was falsely accused. Some parents though I was having improper relations with some of the youth that I worked with, and they went to my supervisors and expressed their concerns, all because some kids actually listened to some general life advice that I gave them and went home most days telling their parents how awesome of a teacher I was. The administration had my back and praised my work with the youth. They explained to me that these parents were hyper helicopter parents who were suspicious of everyone, but that didn't stop the rumors. It didn't stop the pain I felt either. I left that building at the end of the year and slowly withdrew from all other extracurriculars because I was so hurt by the accusation. I didn't withdraw quickly because I didn't want people to have any ammo to use against me, showing proof that I was guilty because I left so quickly after the accusations. For about a year I had a different job in a different field entirely. I was paranoid someone else would accuse me of anything. I stayed away from kids of all ages entirely. When I finally went back into the education field, the rumors had subsided, but were still there. They actually prevented my wife from getting a job on one occasion because the person wouldn't hire her because she was married to me. I'm now moving to a different part of the state to get away from these rumors. Even though I was never actually propositioned by a student, those rumors do hurt. Can confirm. Worked as a TA and was once offered favors in return for a letter grade bump on an exam. I was assigned to help a small group of students who struggled with their lab reports or exam scores. As we were walking out of the room after our session, one young woman, who had been a little flirtatious and had been strutting her stuff, turned around and told me she had worn her tightest pants for me and something along the lines of, when you grade the next exam maybe you'll think of that and think of how we could do things to help each other. I was a little taken aback, but told her I had no power over grades, blatant lie, and that she'd be better off studying with her friends from now on. She rolled her eyes, but nothing else happened after that, and she acted like it never happened. My professor told me that on average once per semester a young woman would come into his office, usually towards the last week or two, and say something along the lines of "I'll do anything," accompanied with some hinting motions. Think, pulling a dress up to show more leg, running a hand over their breast, etc. The sad thing is, they'd usually offer this up in exchange for passing the course with a C grade and not even ask for an A. My fiancé teaches at an in-house school for juvenile delinquents. They live in the facility and have to pass/behave for weekend home passes. Every day at least one student hits on her. Matter of fact, I got a text a few hours ago saying that a boy, 19 years old, came up to her and said casually, "You know, my is 9 inches. She then followed that text by saying he's mad at her now because she had written him up and revoked his home pass. Considering the school and her students, I'm not surprised at the rate at which that occurs. I was an adjunct at a community college when I was starting my PhD. I was in my early 20s and was engaged but not married, so I didn't have a ring yet. Anyways, I had this chick in my class that a few weeks in sent me an email asking if I would want to go out sometime. I responded that it wasn't appropriate and I was engaged. She apologized, so I figured that was that. Towards the end of the class she sent me an email asking about her grade and whatnot, and says because I really need a B, as in BJ. I answered her other questions, ignored that part, and she didn't mention it again. I also have had students that are less blunt awkwardly come on to me. One that comes to mind was a student came up after class and asked what it meant if she thinks about sex a lot, like all the time, even in your class. I teach psychology, so that's at least in the ballpark, but it had nothing to do with the course content. Background: T had a freshman intro course multiple years in a row. I was voted best TA in the subject by the department year after year, so I would be asked back and would make it fit into my schedule. One semester I had a classroom full of incredibly hot females, mainly athletes, as the time of the course was optimal, and they all handed me their schedules at the beginning of the course, so I would know when they would miss. Anywho, there was one particular girl who struggled all semester, assignments always late, 20% off the top, never seemed to be focused, and hounded me for extra credit assignments, ways to improve her grade, etc. I tried really hard to get my students to do well. I would go the extra mile, and once a semester I would offer a challenge for extra credit. She did the extra credit, but her grade even still suffered, and she was at risk of failing what I would say is a cake class. So part of the class was to researched paper/reports, one halfway through the semester and one at the end. She did quite well on the midterm one, but as we closed in on the final one I noticed she was very erratic and stressed. Seemed like she wasn't able to juggle her course load, and this was the class she was letting go. I approached her about it, and she explained the situation. The final report had a specific time it needed to be turned in by. I sat in my office as students poured in to hand it in before the deadline, but not her. I waited and waited and didn't see her. 2 minutes to deadline I get a text message from her. She is across town and was on her way. Would I please wait so she could turn it in on time? Silly me, I obliged her request and waited 45 minutes, after which she hadn't shown. So I went home with my stack of papers, grabbed some beers on the way, and tucked in for a night of drinking and grading. 12:45 AM I received another text from her asking where I lived. After a few back and forth texts I agreed to tell her where, and that I would only be up for 22-30 more minutes and her paper was late. 30 minutes pass, and she hasn't shown up, so I get ready for bed. 10 minutes later I hear a knock on my door. She has finally shown up, paper in hand. I'll let her in, and as a concerned person have her explain what's going on. I'm kind of a pushover for a good sob story, she explains, and while it's fairly believable I tell her I really can't make an exception for it. It's hard to remember the exact reasoning, but it was lame, and during this time she is rummaging through my kitchen and pours herself a shot. I say I'm going to bed, and she better head out, and she pushes me back down on my futon, and I'll never forget it says, I will do anything to pass this class. Plus you're cute. Being the moral upstanding gentleman I declined her offer, but then another deal was made. It was the end of the spring semester and heading into summer, and she said, if the paper is really good will you grade it the best you can, so I can stay on the team? I agreed with her adding, and we can have some fun this summer. She passed the class, barely enough to stay on her respective water sport, and we had a weekend fling that occurred outside of me being a TA during that summer. Win-win. Not really what OP was alluding to, but I'll share anyway. I used to teach Kung Fu many moons ago, hence the username. I had one particular female student who pursued me relentlessly. I acquiesced after a club night out. She was hot, a body to tempt any genus of fauna. She had I could watch for hours, which I frequently did during training. Anyway, after a night of debauchery she says, so, does this mean I'm gonna get my green belt next Saturday? Spoiler, she got her green belt. Prolapse Ninja Reddit for all those saying Kung Fu doesn't give belts, you are half correct. Or at least you are in my experience. The belts were indeed called sashes, but I did mention this was many moons ago. With my increasing age, and the fact I posted this after a couple of hours afternoon drinking at the pub. Half day for me today, plus no work tomorrow. Whoop, early weekend. Details like this are inconsequential, especially for a middle-aged guy reliving his heyday. Anyone saying there is no ranking system in Kung Fu at all are thinking about the art as taught in China in the Shaolin temples. Western schools do indeed have a ranking system to encourage and promote enrollment. I was a TA in a general biology class. The professor had me grade all the quizzes which were worth 30% of the total grade of the course. This gorgeous tradelt came to office hours after the first quiz, and she was upset that she had gotten a failing grade on it. I'm a care for women who cry, so I was telling her it was alright, that it's only the first quiz. She looked up at me and told me that she would if I have her a B on the quiz. I looked at her and told her to give me her number and that I would text her that night. I got a BJ at the park and she got a B on that quiz. The next day, she comes into my office and tells me that she would have sex with me every week for an A on every quiz. Took her up on it, banged her in my apartment every weekend. She passed the class with a B.